Welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast, where we explore the connection between mental health and faith. I'm Dr. Matthew Stanford, neuroscientist, author, and mental health advocate.
And I'm Dr. Madeline Stiers, therapist and trauma researcher. We're so glad you're joining us today. Each week, we have authentic conversations about personal stories, we share professional insights, and explore the meaningful ways faith can influence mental well-being.
Whether you're seeking comfort, understanding, or simply a new perspective, we're here to journey with you. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's conversation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. We're glad to have you here today. And today we'll be talking about supporting a loved one with mental illness, how to understand what mental illness is, how to offer support, set boundaries, take care of yourself, and navigate through the challenges that come along with caregiving or just loving someone who is struggling with their mental health. Mental health sits on a spectrum, right? So people who are very unwell in their mental health oftentimes have a lot of challenges and need assistance and support from the people in their lives and their community. And if you're someone out there who's listening and is that caregiver or is someone in support of someone who is struggling, we recognize that it is oftentimes a challenge and can be a burden on, your soul, your heart, your physical and mental wellness. So yeah, I guess let's jump into it. Matt, any thoughts as to start us off?
Yeah, I think this is oftentimes kind of forgotten part of mental health care is the family or the loved ones who help care for the person, or we might just say help support the person. You don't have to be the person that's actually caring for them, like making sure they have food, things like that. Just being a supportive presence is very important. But support's a tremendously important part of mental health recovery. And I think a lot of times we just kind of forget that. We treat it a lot of times like we would someone who has strep throat. You just go to the doctor and they're going to give you some medicine and you're going to take that medicine and you're going to rest and your strep throat's going to go away. And that's just not how mental health problems work. We may use medication to treat them. We may use a lot of other things to treat them as well, but they can be chronic conditions. They can be long-term conditions. And they're not just going to go away after 10 days of medication. So the person's going to need support. One of the things I say a lot of times is, mental health problems are the only problem where the kind of disorder or dysregulated organ is the one that has to make the decisions for care. So your brain is not thinking correctly. Your emotions might be out of control. Your cognitions might be disoriented, and you have to make decisions for your own care. So that's where a support system can come in and really be there to help people think through those things, help them find providers, just be present to listen, and in some instances, be a caregiver, provide food, shelter, safety, things like that, if that's necessary.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, with the stigma around mental illness and people just kind of being unaware about what it is and how intense it can be, they may not understand that someone who's struggling with their mental health may actually need a lot more support than, it's not like you said, it's not like you just have strep throat or the flu or, you're going to be down for a little bit. This might be a chronic issue that someone's may struggle with the rest of their life. And I think just the lack of education generally around what mental illness is and kind of thinking that you can just think it away or pray it away and that your mental health will just get so much better if that's the case. But exactly what you said, my mental illness is the only illness in which the illness itself prevents you from getting support and care because you're kind of working against yourself. Whether you're depressed and laying around and unable to get up like physically to get to seek support, or, it's schizophrenia or bipolar disorder where you may be unaware that you're actually ill, that there's something actually happening with you.
You're right. A lot of times, it's not uncommon for someone with mental health problem to not want to get care, not want to get help, say that they don't need support. I think you would agree with this, probably one of the number one questions we get here at the Hope and Healing Center from families, from people who call looking for assistance, is something along the lines of, I think my loved one has a mental health problem and they need to get care or they need to get help. How do I get them to get help? They don't want to get any help. And so, it's a lot of times it's a family member, and we have this conversation all the time. A lot of times it's a family member that contacts us. And the question we have to ask the family member is, well, does your loved one want to get help? because we can't make someone get help unless they're a danger to themselves or others. And that's a pretty high threshold to reach. And so,
Absolutely.
so I think that, that becomes a problem. So here we have a family that may want to support the loved one, but a loved one who may say they don't need the support, a loved one who may say they're not ill, depending on maybe their illness as you said, makes them think that they're not ill. And the other thing is that a lot of times people with mental health problems, just because of the nature of the mental health problem, can be pretty aversive to be around. People that are severely depressed are not pleasant to be around. They are really, really down. They're really, really dark. They really don't have anything positive to say. And if they say anything at all, and a lot of times just want to lay around and sleep. And so people are kind of like, well, you just need to get up and get on with it. That kind of think your way out of it, work your way out of it type of thing. Because again, we put that into the context of ourselves. And so the stigma associated with mental health problems a lot of times will keep people from wanting to go to a mental health care provider. So there's a lot of, I don't know if I refer to them as barriers, but kind of hindrances to being able to effectively support someone with a mental health problem. And sometimes it's the person themselves. And so there's a lot going on there. It's not just as simple as, well, I found out that John has depression, and so I'm just going to take him a casserole real quick and everything's going to be great.
Yeah,
That might be nice, but it might not be what he needs at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we do here is sitting down with loved ones and kind of walking them through some of the practical things of how do you have these conversations with someone who either recognizes or doesn't recognize that they're ill, and how do you support them through those challenging conversations, but then also kind of practically what can you do. So one of the things that we always say is listen without judgment. You're approaching this conversation. You have to remind yourself that you're approaching these conversations with love, right? You care about this person. You want them to get some support. And that's the goal, right? Everyone wants this person to be happy. By the time they make it here, oftentimes these conversations have been had over and over again with their loved one. And so parents and spouses and siblings are typically pretty frustrated. Like you said, it's not always a pleasant experience. And so, the people are at their wits' end, they're frustrated, and we just have to remind them, be patient. It takes time. Getting to the point where someone is able or willing to seek care can take some time. And then how do you encourage professional help, and what does professional help look like? Communicating with someone who's struggling with their mental health, we typically say, because what we often see is the parents or the loved ones will be like, well, you're sick. There's something wrong with you. You're depressed. You have this. And that person goes, well, you're saying there's something wrong with me, and now I'm offended. And really we try to say, like, what's the goal? The goal is for this person to be happy, right? You want your loved one to succeed and be happy and flourish in life. So we say, approach the conversation with that in mind, right? Like, if I said, Matt, like, I'm worried about you. You don't seem happy to me. And this works with a lot of mental illnesses, but not all, right? Because there is that euphoria in some that we see. But, life isn't what you wanted. You wanted X, Y, and Z, and, you're struggling through that. Like, I love you and I want you to be happy. Like, how can I help? And offer to support, set boundaries if they're asking for things that are outside of the realm of your willingness to support. And then offer thoughts like, would you be willing to talk to a therapist or see a doctor, medication, offering different levels of support. There's, peer support, there's support groups, there's phone warm lines, there's therapists, licensed professionals, there's psychiatrists or doctors who can prescribe medication. So walking with them through different suggestions and options, with keeping in mind the goal is for this person to be happy and functioning, right? So as opposed to approaching it with you're sick, there's something wrong with you, you need to do something, take these steps to feel better. It's, we love you, we care about you, we have this unified goal in mind, right? That you're unhappy and you want to be happy, and we want you to be happy as well. And then offer practical support in ways that don't overburden you or kind of step into over caring for them. But if they need practical support with like doing daily tasks, help them and say, we're here to support you in this, and we want to see you get some additional care, right? Because family can't take on the weight of an entire mental illness on their own. Like there does need to be some professional support there as well. And we know it weighs on the family of loved ones. So those are just some practical ways. One of the biggest things is we see families come in and they're so frustrated, which understandably we get that. And I go, let's bring it back to what's the goal. The goal is, what's the purpose you're here is you love this person. And the goal is that they're happy and thriving, right? And oftentimes that renews the idea of like, okay, this mess that we've been kind of shoveling through, it's been cleared now. Like I understand what the goal is. And
right. No, I think, we see that all the time, frustration in families. Usually that's because it's been going on for a while and they've continued to try different things. I see it as a really kind of two problems that they have that lead to all the frustration. One is they have a very kind of fix-it mindset. So I'm going to fix it, so my loved one is sick or whatever, however they want to contextualize it. And I'm going to fix it, which means I'm going to come up with a plan, 3 or 4 specific things that person has to do. And then that's going to fix everything. And then, they lay out, point number 1 and the person goes, well, I'm not doing that, and so,
Right.
so then that's it. Like, well, they are, I can't fix them. They won't let me fix them. So number 1, for those of you out there that are working to support a loved one, you have to get rid of the fix it mindset. You are supporting them. And so the way to think about that is they're going through an experience. It just happens to be a mental health issue or concern or problem. And they are going through this experience, just like they might be going through a physical health problem. They might be going through a relational problem. They're going through an experience, and you are there to support them as they work their way through this experience. And that may be just being present and listening to them when they're talking. That might be, as you said, being present and offering some physical support, clean their house, mow their grass, whatever. That may be there to kind of connect them to professional care because it's very confusing. And, if I had severe depression, it would be much more difficult for me to find a good provider that I could access than someone who didn't. So you're providing the support that is going to be helpful for them. And but not a fix it mindset. I've got 3 things and you're going to do it. And then I think the other thing goes along with that, and this is kind of unrealistic expectations. And so that's a lot of times tied to the idea that, well, if my loved one would just X, Y, and Z, then they wouldn't have this problem anymore. So I see this a lot of times, and I've seen this a lot of times with families that had people who had psychotic disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar. Well, they just need purpose in their life. So they need to get a job because they just sit around all day and they don't do anything. Those types of things. And, and then I think you have to ask yourself, is it realistic to imagine that my loved one in those situations where I literally am caring for them, is going to go out and be able to get a job and hold that job? I mean, you have to have realistic expectations. I think you have to have realistic time expectations of how long it takes a person to get through a significant mental health problem. So I always tell families, you need to not think days to weeks. You need to think months to years because, they didn't just get in this overnight. This is a progressive thing that's occurred over time. It may kind of seem like it happened overnight because it got to a point where it just kind of everything hit the fan. But the reality is it's probably been developing over some period of time. And so there are biological aspects, there are environmental aspects. I mean, there are a lot of things going on here. They're not going to just kind of think their way out of it, as you said. So it takes time. And then even within mental health care, it takes time to figure out proper medications, proper therapeutic intervention. Therapeutic interventions are notoriously slow, intermittent, meeting maybe once, maybe at most twice a week with somebody. That can go on for months. And
so medication aspect.
Yeah, I really think that, those kind of getting out of that fix-it mindset and being more of a support and thinking of recovery as a process, and then realistic expectations. And I think one of the things you can do to help yourself do that is, as someone who supports someone, get into a support group for families that are caring or supporting a loved one with a mental health problem, or yourself talk to a counselor to get some feedback on what that might look like. And I think the number one thing, the first thing that we always should do is educate ourselves about whatever the illness is. So let's assume that your loved one has been diagnosed with some illness. So they have bipolar disorder. Learn everything you can about bipolar disorder. Learn everything you can about the medication that they're taking. What are the expected benefits of that medication? What are the expected side effects of that medication? What kind of resources exist for people with bipolar disorder? All of these kind of things. Learn what you can, because the more you know, the better you can support your loved one. Because they don't have to go out and learn all those things. You can learn that for them, and they can just try to kind of work through the process.
Yeah, the medication aspect is something we hear a lot of frustration around. Is once someone has agreed to get care, it's, well, they've been on this medication for 2 months and, things are not getting better. And unfortunately, like you said, it can take some time. It's oftentimes trial and error, getting on a medication and then either upping the dose or having to switch to a different type of medication, whether it's an SSRI or a mood stabilizer. And that can be really frustrating. And then alongside that, the side effects that come with medication
Right.
can be pretty heavy. And
those have to be weighed against the benefit. I mean, that's
right.
the thing. And I will tell you, I've had clients myself that make really ridiculous decisions in relationship to their medication. Had a client for a long time, incredibly suicidal individual, very severe depression and OCD, suicidal almost on a, suicidal thoughts on almost a daily basis for years. Finally found a medication that was helpful with that. But one of its side effects is it is notorious for putting on extra weight. And he was a good 20 pounds overweight, and literally said to me, I'm not going to take this anymore because I don't want to have all this weight on me. And we talked about it. Well, what's going to happen? He goes, absolutely. I would rather be suicidal than have this weight on.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's interesting.
And so, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, and people get to make their own decisions. I mean,
Absolutely they do.
it really is. We have a lot of clients. I mean, with medication, it's such a challenge because you start taking medicine, and if you get in the right concoction or whatnot, and you start to feel better, and then months go by, and then years go by, and you go, why am I taking, like, couldn't tell you how many times I've seen this happen. Someone goes, I feel great. I feel great. I feel great.
Right.
And then you start to see them decline, and you're like, what's going on? Well, I stopped taking my medicine.
Right.
And you go, why? Why did you stop taking your antidepressant? Like, what happened? Well, I was feeling really good, so I stopped taking it. And you go, right. But you have to remember.
I was going to show everyone I could do it without it.
Yeah, typically,
so good.
It's like, they're like, I was feeling great. And, here you go, yes. And that's lovely and what's wonderful. And the reason that you were able to feel so great is the medication was helping with that.
Right.
And I think people forget. And then it's frustrating. You don't want to people don't want to feel like they're dependent on a medication, or even just the process of having to remember to take the medication every day.
Right.
If it's morning
or the side effects. I mean, again,
or the side effects. Yeah, absolutely.
If it's a cost benefit kind of thing. I mean, there are going to be side effects. There are side effects with every medication that anyone takes. Some of them are minor, some of them are major. So some psychiatric medications have minor side effects, some have major side effects. But sometimes a major side effect from an effective medication is better than the untreated symptom of the illness. And so, you really have to kind of weigh those. But you also have to be, at some level, respectful of the individual to make their own decisions, and that becomes very, very difficult. And that's where this tremendous frustration comes in, because just to kind of not be the kind of prophet of doom here, when a person stops taking their medication, it is not uncommon that you have to start all over again. And I've also seen, and there have been studies that have demonstrated that individuals that have found benefit with a medication that stopped taking the medication, when they started taking the medication again, it did not have the same effect because their brain was not the same anymore. It had been altered.
Right.
And so there are all kinds of psychiatric treatment is not like the treatment of infections and things like that. I mean, you may have the same diagnosis I have, and you may manifest the exact same symptoms that I manifest, and the medication that works for you does not work for me. And so now I would say that therapy is not that way. You have a handful of therapies that are very effective for different types of illnesses, uh, but the individual has to be at a point where they actually can engage that therapy and be a contributing part of their treatment. And they may not be there without the medication. So there's a lot of, I know a few years back, there was a study done that said on average 2.5 years to find the right mixture of medications for a client. Because it really is kind of a trial and error kind of a thing, because just because you have depression doesn't mean antidepressant X is going to work for you. So it can be very frustrating for families. And again, I think that's why families and friends that are trying to support someone have to step back and kind of take yourself out of that, I'm going to fix this kind of thing, and just keep saying, I'm going to support. But also, I think you need support. I think it's very helpful to be in a caregiver support group or something where you have someone to talk it through. And I think being in a caregiver support group allows you to hear what other people have experienced, the things that have worked for them, not worked for them and their loved one. And it does give you fresh ideas. It also shows you that the frustration that you feel is not something unique to you, and it certainly isn't something unique to your loved one. It's not that your loved one is the most resistant individual. We could sit here all day and give stories about resistant individuals. I mean, that's just the nature of mental health care, unfortunately. So people that have heart problems don't usually tell the doctors and people supporting them and trying to care for them, well, I don't really think I have a heart problem, so I'm not going to do anything. And that's very common in mental health. So, education, I think, is very important. And maintaining your own health is very, very important. I think from a spiritual perspective, I think it's important to really affirm the person as who they are as a child of God, who they are in Christ, their identity in Christ, as opposed to them as a diagnosis. I think that's a lot of kind of the personal stigma of mental health, is that I've become little more than a diagnosis. So, you hear people say, well, he's a schizophrenic, or, she's bipolar disorder, and so, or she's bipolar, so you don't talk about people with physical illnesses like that. So I think really affirming them, their value, their worth within their spiritual life, the role that God plays there as a comfort, a support, empowering them in recovery, the role of transformation in religion and spirituality, the fact that, changing, that's part of what it is to be a Christian, right? That we're being transformed. And so those things are all very positive. So the fact that you're not where you want to be, and you want to be, as you said, in a better place, you want to be in a better quality of life, you want to be happier, and those things are all consistent with transformation from a faith perspective. And so you can just kind of integrate that together. And I think that's very helpful in building hope for individuals.
Yeah. And utilizing what their belief system is to reinforce, we talk about, again, mental health, physical health, relational health, and spiritual health,
Right.
all in the same kind of bucket of wellness, and they don't sit isolated from one another. So when you're working to support someone, you may be frustrated and stressed and overwhelmed or worried, and seek comfort and support from your faith community and leaders, and the person whose mental health is declining or who's unwell can also seek support. And
I think a lot of times people are like, well, I don't know what to do. I hear that a lot. And I mean, the first thing I would say is, the simplest thing would just be do whatever you would want someone to do for you. I think that, how would you want someone to support you? But, you certainly can ask someone, what, I don't know what to do to help you. What can I do to help you? And just simple things. I think small things make a huge difference. I know in the past, I've known, say, spouses that had a spouse that was significantly depressed or had been diagnosed with a more serious mental health problem, and now were home because they weren't able to maintain a job. So they were home recovering. And, you have another spouse that's kind of carrying all the burden. Well, taking that individual out for coffee just so that they can have a little respite and talk to another person and not think about mental health issues for a moment, that can be tremendously supportive. I mean, so
Right.
it doesn't have to be like, well, I'm going to come up with a 12-step plan to fix you or your loved one or whatever. I mean, you can just come alongside them and offer, and I mentioned the casserole earlier, that's my friend Amy Simpson, who's an author and mental health advocate. She always says, mental illness is the no casserole illness in the church. Cause you tell someone that you've got cancer, they'll bring you a casserole, because they don't know what to do. They just want to be supportive. But you tell them you got bipolar disorder and you never hear from them. So, sometimes, it might be as easy as dropping off a gift card or hey, I'm going to have a meal DoorDash to you tonight, just to say I'm here. It doesn't have to be transformative in some kind of, you're going to make some statement to them. So little things make a huge difference. And I think we need to remember that. All right. And wrapping it up, I think the thing I would reiterate the most is, supporting someone, a loved one, a friend with a mental illness is really a marathon. It's not a sprint. This isn't something that's going to be fixed in a very short period of time. This is just part of your friendship or your relation now, and you're going to walk along with them. And I think being there is the most important thing. I think listening is probably the next most important thing. And I think after that, we can add in, more specifics like where we're going to refer them to a mental health care provider or things like that, if that's something that they need us to do or would like us to do. So please just do be present. I think the worst thing that can be done, and I've seen this sadly many, many times, is that because you don't feel like you know what to do, or because you are frustrated by the individual, you pull away. And you kind of just ignore them. And I've seen that happen many, many times when I think it was a person who really wanted to help, but really either was frustrated or didn't know what to do. Just do something, just do something small. And I think that'll make a big difference. So thanks for joining us on this episode of Madness and Grace. We'll be back soon to continue our conversations in mental health and faith. And please check the notes. We'll leave some links to some of the trainings that we offer if you're looking for more training and resources and how you might support individuals with mental health problems.
Thanks for joining our conversation on this episode of the Madness and Grace podcast. If you found value in our discussion today, we'd love it if you'd subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps others find these important conversations.
Sharing this podcast with friends and family members is also a wonderful way to extend hope to those who might be struggling with mental health concerns.
We'll be back next time with another candid conversation about madness and grace. See you then.